Imagine the scene. The steps of the federal courthouse have turned into a makeshift festival ground on one side, a cheering crowd hoisting signs proclaiming, "Free Brooks!" On the other, a riffraff brigade grumbling, "Treasonous traitor!" as though they're auditioning for a political sitcom. The cacophony of chants and megaphones rivals a sporting event, minus the concession stands and hot dogs. Into this whirlwind strides Lieutenant Commander Talia Brooks, her wrists now cuffed, her gleaming Medal of Honor uniform swapped for the season's hottest inmate orange. Fashion forward, right? Just hours earlier, Talia was moments away from receiving the nation's highest military honor. Now she's the headline act in a drama titled National Security Violations and Possible Treason. As Judge Thompson intones the charge sheet, one sounding more ominous than the last, Talia maintains sniper-level silence, chin up, gaze fixed ahead, as if she's aiming at an invisible target rather than enduring a court summons. You almost expect her to quip, "Hold your fire, Your Honor, I'll plead later." Oh. Inside the courtroom, her old SEAL Team 6 comrades cluster together whispering, "Is this real life?" They've weathered mortar strikes and midnight raids, but nothing prepared them for the spectacle of Brooks in orange. You can almost hear their internal monologues. Seriously, they did not just cuff her. Then cue, dramatic soundtrack, Admiral Reed enters. His mere presence hushes the room faster than a mic drop at a rock concert. With measured steps and a poker face that could silence artillery, he motions to Judge Thompson for a private conference. Whispers ripple through the gallery, "What bombshell is coming next?" Apparently, the prosecution's star witness is not a star at all, but a scapegoat for a top-secret cover-up of Afghan evidence. Who knew? In that heartbeat, Talia's steely gaze meets Reed's knowing look, and you sense an alliance forming like Batman finally finding his Robin. It's the unexpected team-up between staunch lawkeepers and a warrior who's seen too many dark secrets. And somewhere in the back row, a protest sign flutters, "Trust us, she's innocent." If only all court days had this much flair. 2 years ago, nestled in the rocky heart of an Afghan valley, Lieutenant Commander Talia Brooks found herself leading Operation Glass de Guerre mission so hush-hush that even most of her fellow SEALs thought it was a myth. Alongside her were Team Bravo, under the ever-steady Aaron Hayes, and Team Charlie, navigated by Marcus Lee's wry one-liners. Under the crosshairs of her sniper scope, Talia expected to spot hardened militants, not a clandestine prison complex. Instead of suicide bombers or weapons caches, she found rows of malnourished civiliansmen, women, and children of various nationalities, locked behind barbed wire and, worse, subject to unspeakable biological experiments. Orders had come down with all the subtlety of a freight train. Observe only. No engagement. That directive, stamped top secret, and signed by higher-ups including Admiral Reed himself, was supposed to keep Brooks's team from stirring up any diplomatic incidents. In most cases, obedient soldiers grunt and comply, but when those civilians turned out to be live test subjects for a bioweapon program run by a shadowy contractor, Talia's moral compass spun out of control. She issued the only order she could live with: rescue them. At 2:30 p.m., under a crescent moon, the three teams converged on the compound. Hayes's diversion's carefully choreographed explosions along the northern perimeter were so precise they'd have earned applause in a fireworks show. Charlie slipped in quietly, securing the compound's main gate, while Talia and re-empowered second-in-command Dalton made their way to the makeshift cells. They freed 37 terrified souls, guiding them towards safety like a herd of startled sheep. Then the plot twist nobody saw coming. Dalton, the dependable petty officer who'd shared sandwiches and jokes with Talia for years, betrayed them. He'd been moonlighting for Black River, a private military outfit with a vested interest in keeping this facility off the books. In the fluorescent glare of the lab, Talia found herself grappling with her former teammate, trading punches amid rows of vials and viral samples. The more they fought, the more it became clear. This wasn't just a prison, it was a bioweapons testing center. As if on cue, Black River's own helicopters appeared on the horizon, launching missiles that turned the night sky into an inferno. The teams scrambled, herding the rescued civilians back toward extraction points. Blasts rocked the compound, spray painting Talia's uniform with dust and sparks. Yet, despite the chaos, she held firm because saving those innocents was the only mission that ever mattered. By dawn, the dust had settled. The 37 survivors were loaded onto waiting choppers, breathing free air for the first time in weeks. Talia, bloodied but unbowed, surveyed the smoldering wreckage. She'd defied direct orders, faced betrayal at close quarters, and exposed a government-sponsored atrocity all while wearing body armor. And somewhere between the echo of explosions and the whir of rotor blades, she realized that following her conscience might be the most dangerous orders she'd ever receive. By the time the dust settled and the last missile echo faded into the dawn air, Talia was already corralling the rescued civilians toward the hovering choppers like a seasoned traffic cop in a demolition derby. Imagine her helmet off, hair plastered with sweat, and Ash waving her arms wildly through the smoky haze. "Move it, folks! The cavalry's here!" The 37 survivors, blinking like startled owls, stumbled toward freedom. Then, as if the universe couldn't resist one more drama highlight, Talia spotted a tiny figure huddled beneath a collapsed roof beam, a girl, no more than 7, wide-eyed and frozen stiff. Without a second thought, Talia sprinted through the debris field, dodging sparks and flying chunks of concrete like an action heroine auditioning for the next blockbuster. She scooped the child into her arms and spun behind a shattered wall just as a secondary blast ripped through the compound. Debris sprayed everywhere. The world itself seemed to yawn before slamming shut. Talia felt the shockwave knock the wind out of her lungs, but she never loosened her embrace. Because real heroes don't drop the kid, right? By the time the rescue helicopters lifted off, those 37 souls were climbing aboard under Talia's watchful eye, every last one having a front-row seat to biological warfare, gone horribly wrong. As the rotors churned skyward, she allowed herself a grim smile. Mission accomplished, even if the mission briefing had emphatically said, "No detours into moral dilemmas." Back at Naval Headquarters, though, it was a different kind of battlefield. Rather than cheers, Talia found herself met with stony-faced admirals and a flurry of hush-hush orders. The phrase, "plausible deniability," buzzed through the corridors like an unwelcome mosquito. Black River Operative Sever, so helpful, slipped into conversations with smarmy grins, quietly reminding everyone that these things happen. Witnesses began dying in unfortunate accidents, car crashes, freak falls, spontaneous combustion. Okay, maybe not that last one. Talia heard whispers, "Stand down, keep quiet," and "Enjoy that honor ceremony you'll never attend," all while Admiral Reed, normally a fortress of calm, found his clearance blocked at every turn. And so, just as she thought she might get an invite to Buckingham Palace for her heroics, Talia got one of those awkward, urgent reassignment orders straight to the front lines, naturally, so she'd be too busy dodging bullets to talk about what really happened. In a twist worthy of its own secret mission, the Navy scheduled her court-martial for surprise 2 days before her Medal of Honor ceremony. Talk about timing, huh? There she stood, once again donning the orange jumpsuit of a criminal, her mouth sealed tighter than a submarine hatch. The memory of that little girl's terrified eyes, and the stench of those makeshift cages, burned in her mind. Talia understood, in no uncertain terms, that sometimes the true battle happens long after the dust clears, when the real enemy is a conspiracy of silence. And let's be honest, she'd rather face down rockets than a room full of bureaucrats any day. By mid-morning, the courtroom had become its own brand of reality television. Prosecutor Philip Mercer rose, cleared his throat theatrically, and declared that Lieutenant Commander Talia Brooks was a clear and present danger to national security, insisting she remain in custody without bail. Mercer's delivery was so passionate you half expected him to hover over the judge's bench and flash a PowerPoint slide detailing her threat metrics. Just as the bailiffs were shuffling Talia back to her chair, cliché gavel bang, imminent, the doors flew open like a movie set explosion. In strode Admiral Reed, flanked by a phalanx of black-suited security specialists who looked as comfortable wielding classified documents as they would a squad rifle. He fixed Judge Thompson with a look that said, "One private word now." The gallery collectively leaned in, popcorn style, as Reed requested an immediate recess to discuss evidence behind closed doors. Cue dramatic courtroom hush. While everyone else was still gasping, Fiona Blake, a sharp-eyed DOJ agent in the National Security Division, sat in the back row, mentally checking off her weirdness bingo card. First square. Talia had been hauled in with more restraints than a bank robber on Rikers Island. Second, not a single Navy flag officer was present to vouch for their star sniper. Third, Senator Admiral Hale, the chairman of the Armed Services Committee, lounged in the corner like he owned the place, and maybe he did. His steely stare locked onto Talia, as if she were the final piece in some grand political chess match. Fiona's gut churned. This wasn't a simple leak and lockup scenario. No, this reeked of payback revenge served cold, with a side of Black Ops cover-up. Somewhere between Mercer's threat hype and Reed's emergency powwow, she caught sight of Mercer slipping Reed an impatient glance that screamed, "We've got to bury this fast." It was like watching a magician nervously shuffle the deck while the audience senses the trick. As the bailiffs herded everyone into a wood-paneled anteroom, Fiona discreetly sank lower in her seat, fingertips tapping out a quick memo on her secure device. She'd seen plenty of national security cases, but never one so theatrically orchestrated. With each passing second, she pieced together a narrative far darker than any courtroom drama. A punitive operation aimed not at safeguarding secrets, but at silencing a whistleblower who dared to shine daylight on atrocities. When the private conference began, murmurs swirled about classified intel and safeguarding ongoing missions, but Fiona refused to be distracted. As the heavy doors closed, she pressed her ear to the crack, determined to get to the bottom of what was really driving this show trial. Because in her book, chasing justice was more thrilling than any conspiracy-laden plot, especially when the plot was rigged against the hero. While the courtroom drama hit its intermission, Fiona Blake wasn't in the mood for popcorn. Instead, she slipped out to her makeshift command center in the DOJ basement. It was really just a little used office, with a creaky chair and an ancient computer. As Talia Brooks took the stand as bait, Fiona quietly pieced together a far more insidious plot. Talia was a decoy meant to flush out Admiral Reed, the one senior officer with the clout and the conscience, to derail a top-secret bioweapons program. Her discovery came courtesy of an anonymous tip on the dark webbies. Apparently even back-alley internet forums have a moral compass. A chilling message flashed on a board labeled Glasshouse Protocol. Eliminate all evidence. Neutralize witnesses. No loose ends. Suddenly, the phrase, cover-up, felt like the understatement of the century. Meanwhile, in his suburban den in Virginia, Eli Chenthi, hacktastic former NSA cryptologist whom Talia once rescued, was doing what he does best, breaching digital fortresses. With the kind of giddy determination usually reserved for holiday shopping on Black Friday, Eli punched through OIS's security layers. In mere hours, he siphoned terabytes of classified files on Project Echo, revealing hundreds of illegal bioweapon tests on innocent civilians. Think. Biological horror flick meets forensic report. Back in the courthouse anteroom, Fiona's phone buzzed with each new leak. She exchanged conspiratorial glances with her buddy Agent Blake. Oh wait, that's her. She then nudged Admiral Reed, who looked like he'd just gulped a gallon of bad coffee. "Sir," she whispered, "we're not just fighting red tape. We're fighting a shadow government that considers collateral damage a budget line item." Talia, still rocking that chic orange jumpsuit, caught Fiona's eye and offered a nod that said, "Time to suit up." Admiral Reed leaned in, his expression a blend of grim resolve and mild irritation. "Something about being ambushed in your own trial does that to you," he quipped. "I thought courtroom battles only happened in Hollywood." Oh. But this was no movie. Armed with Eli's digital dossier, Fiona, Reed, and Brooks realized they were up against an unholy alliance of private contractors, rogue officials, and, apparently a few too many tortured acronyms. Their adversary? A so-called government operating above the law, where no judge or congressional committee dared tread. As the courtroom doors reopened and they filed back in, the trio shared one last unspoken pact. They would drag this dark government into the light, even if it meant hacking, whistleblowing, and a generous sprinkling of courtroom theatrics. After all, someone had to prove that honesty and a well-timed computer virus could still win the day. When it looked like Talia was about to vanish into a Black Ops kangaroo court, the White House dropped a surprise play. A presidential order to release her and ship her over to the Office of International Security, OIS, headquarters. Think walled fortress meets corporate campus, with a side of 24/7 CC television. No handshakes, no hero's welcome, just a stern, "Follow me" from an OIS flunky, and a stern warning, "Don't wander off, Lieutenant Commander." Lun. Inside those sleek, sterile halls, Director Price, whose dress code was businessly ominous, sat behind a desk piled with classified folders, looking more like a chess grandmaster than a government official. She wasted no time. "Commander Brooks, let's be frank. You were our bait to lure Admiral Reed into the trap." Her tone suggested Talia was the errant pawn in a board game, far bigger than herself. Talia leaned back in her chair, arms crossed, expression cool as an igloo. "Funny," she drawled, "because I seem to recall the real pawns here are forged documents, bearing Admiral Reed's signature, documents that mysteriously cropped up, authorizing Project Echo." Price's eyebrow nearly hit her hairline. With the precision of a courtroom drama reveal, Talia laid out the conspiracy on Price's polished desk. The official Project Echo orders were counterfeit. Reed's signature was a digital Frankenstein stitched onto emails, and the whole charade was orchestrated by Price herself, Black River's shadowy execs, and none other than Senator Admiral Hale, who apparently thinks public service means serve my private pockets. Meanwhile, back at DOJ Central, Fiona Blake received her own little gift from management, an immediate reassignment to Anchorage, Alaska, which, translated from bureaucratese, means shut up and freeze. Fiona's response: she chuckled, unfurled her DOJ badge, and walked straight through at least 3 armed checkpoints, thanks to her feisty insistence. By midnight, she'd slipped a thumb drive full of irrefutable evidence into Judge Thompson's chambers, preventing Talia's imminent reincarceration at OIS's so-called holding facility. When Price got wind of Fiona's jailbreak, she snarled, "That's a clear breach of protocol." But Fiona merely replied, "Protocol's great until you realize it's how you bury the innocent." By dawn, Price was left alone in her high-security lair, quirking a tight smile at her suddenly very lonely stack of forged memos. And somewhere in that fortress, Talia Brooks and her unlikely allies were plotting the next move, dragging this rogue operation into the light, one classified file at a time. With Talia's explosive courtroom drama still smoldering in memory, Fiona Blake stepped onto a national news set this time, swapping her DOJ blazer for her whistleblower chic look. In living color, she unveiled the digital smoking guns, dossiers from Project Echo, Ghost Protocol schematics, and blueprints of OIS's off-the-books detention camps. The television anchor's jaw literally dropped on live air as Fiona tossed data onto the screen. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is what national security looks like when it goes rogue." Almost overnight, Washington transformed into a political pressure cooker. Capitol Hill lobbyists spilled coffee in panic. Constituents flooded senators' phone lines demanding hearings. And hearings they gotan emergency joint session of Congress convened faster than you can say classified briefing. C-SPAN cameras captured stunned lawmakers as one by one, top brass were led away in handcuffs. Director Price, clutching her briefcase as if it might shield her, and several Black River executives who looked like they'd walked out of a Bond villain audition. Senator Admiral Hale, once smug in his power, soon announced his resignation mid-speech, mumbling something about personal indiscretions that didn't quite pass the truth sniff test. Meanwhile, at a private airfield just outside D.C., a chartered jet prepped for takeoff. Aboard were the 17 survivors of Glass Dagger women, and men whose haunted eyes had found a glimmer of hope. Talia and Admiral Reed oversaw every detail, ensuring each rescued civilian had new documentation, fresh clothes, and a pep talk from Fiona that went roughly, "You thought you'd seen the worst. Welcome to global diplomacy." Oh. Their destination? The United Nations in New York, where the survivors would testify before an assembled audience of diplomats, human rights advocates, and yes, those pesky news cameras again. As the passengers boarded, journalists swarmed, shouting, How does it feel to be the world's most wanted whistleblowers? One survivor simply shrugged and replied, "Better popular than persecuted." Back in D.C., the dark government tried every trick in the book to stop the flight from grounding orders to temporary no-fly zones. But Talia, Fiona, and Reed had preempted them all. They'd bribed, begged, or outmaneuvered every official roadblock. Admirals were called away for urgent consultations, and OIS field agents found themselves pushing subpoenas instead of making arrests. As the jet's engines roared to life, Fiona raised her phone, live streaming the final takeoff. "This plane carries not fugitives," she declared, "but truth. Tellerson that, my friends, is a cargo no amount of secrecy can contain." Above them, the Washington skyline receded, but below, the ripple effect had only just begun. The information weapons they'd unleashed would continue to detonate scandals from the corridors of power to the steps of the UN, and they were only getting started. Stepping up to the witness stand at the United Nations General Assembly, Lieutenant Commander Talia Brooks cut a striking figure in her Navy dress uniform. The rows of flags behind her shimmered under the bright lights, each one a reminder of the global community she was addressing. Taking a steadying breath, she began her testimony with the crisp authority of a seasoned officer. "For too long," Talia said, her voice firm, "we have hidden behind euphemisms and redacted reports. Today, I stand before you to lift the veil on Operation Glass Dagger." She paused, scanning the chamber as delegates leaned forward. "In the dead of night, my team discovered a covert facility not holding terrorists, but innocent men, women, and children, civilians stripped of their rights, subjected to horrific biological experiments." She described how Project Echo operatives had tested lethal pathogens on helpless subjects, monitoring infection rates and mortality outcomes. "These were not enemy combatants," Talia emphasized. "They were human beings, chosen solely for their vulnerability." A faint murmur rippled through the audience as she detailed the cell blocks where the tortured prisoners had been confined, and the clandestine labs where virologists in unmarked uniforms carried out their grim work. Talia's tone sharpened. "When I attempted to report these abuses up my chain of command, I was met with orders to observe only an explicit directive to let atrocities proceed in the name of national security. I refused. I authorized a rescue." The chamber fell silent as she recounted how her teams rescued 37 survivors under fire, even after betrayal by a trusted petty officer. "But loyalty has no exceptions when confronted with evil," she declared, her voice echoing off marble walls. "Our oath is to the Constitution and to humanity itself." At those words, delegates from dozens of nations nodded in unison, some rising to their feet in applause. She concluded with a call to action. "I urge this assembly to establish an independent international inquiry into bioweapon development and unlawful detention. Let this be the moment we reaffirm that dignity and human rights transcend borders and secrecy." In Washington, an emergency session of the Internal Tribunal mirrored Talia's public address. Admiral Reed and Agent Fiona Blake appeared before senior oversight committees, providing unredacted testimony that exposed OIS's closed-door proceedings. Their candid disclosures shook the foundations of the secretive system, prompting the Council to recommend sweeping reforms. As Talia stepped down, a groundswell of support surged through the UN chamber. Her words had not only shone a light on a dark conspiracy, but had galvanized the world to insist that loyalty to one's country must never mean complicity in injustice. As the dust settled, the United Nations formally adopted the Brooks Protocol, a landmark resolution outlawing illicit bioweapons research and mandating transparent, multinational oversight of intelligence operations. The world finally had a clear rulebook. No more backroom experiments. No more unaccountable black sites. The crisis that once had Washington and the UN chamber on the brink of collapse was now a catalyst for global reform. Back home, Fiona Blake was tapped to chair a brand new Independent Intelligence Oversight Commission. Picture her in a crisply tailored suit, poring over classified briefs with a red pen in hand, determined to scrub every corner of the spy world clean. Under her watch, Covert operations would face unprecedented scrutiny, daily briefings, public reports, and whistleblower protection baked into the system. Admiral Reed, ever the reluctant hero, quietly submitted his retirement papers. But he wasn't content to fade into the sunseath, launched the Reed Mentorship Program, a series of seminars for special ops officers on split-second ethics decisions. His motto, "No mission is worth compromising your soul." As for Talia Brooks, she politely declined offers of book deals, speaking tours, and political appointments. Instead, she slipped back into the SEAL training world, trading gowns and gavels for wetsuits and weapons drills. There, she instilled in new recruits the lessons she'd learned the hard way, that true strength comes from unwavering ideals and personal accountability. In her words, "The only weapon more powerful than a round in the chamber is the conviction in your heart." And so, in an era still shadowed by covert ambitions, a ship-shaped trio, Fiona, Reed, and Brooks, ensured that integrity would now be the mission's top objective. In the quiet of her apartment, Talia Brooks found an envelope without a return address. Inside was a crayon drawing of a smiling girl in a pink dress, standing beneath a rainbow, his name scrawled at the bottom, Farah. On the back, in careful child's handwriting, a note. "Dear Commander Brooks, thank you for saving me 2 years ago. I'm safe in Canada now with my new family. You're my hero. Love, Farah." Tears welled in Talia's eyes. That simple drawing, a testament to one life transformed, reminded her that she was never truly alone in this fight. A week later, amid the hush of Arlington National Cemetery's rolling green lawns, Talia knelt before the weathered headstone of her fallen comrade, Lieutenant Commander Michael Thompson. She placed a smooth river stone atop the marker, a silent salute in the old SEAL tradition. Leaning close, she whispered, "You deserved more than recognition, Aaron. I'll give that extra medal to Farah." Standing beside her, Fiona Blake offered a quiet nod. They shared a glance of mutual understanding. This battle for ethics and accountability wasn't over, it was only beginning. Together, they would champion reforms in training academies, push for international accords on lawful conduct, and mentor the next generation of operators in the creed they'd forged through fire. As the autumn sun dipped low, casting long shadows across the rows of white stones, Talia felt a calm resolve settle in her heart. The forces that once thrived in secrecy could not extinguish the light of individual courage or the power of the rule of law. In that golden twilight, she knew their story would ripple far beyond any courtroom or battlefield, and that every stone they left would mark a promise kept. This journey teaches us that when conscience is tested, the brave never stay silent in the face of injustice, even if they stand alone against the system. The core message is, loyalty to one's ideals and humanity allows no exceptions. Justice must be defended through action, not just theory. If you were the protagonist, you wouldn't wait for a miracle, you'd continue using every resource to support the vulnerable, strengthen transparency, and protect witnesses. You'd join independent oversight efforts, back new legislation, and inspire young officers with ethical commitment. As for whether racism will end by 2050, legal measures and resolutions alone aren't enough. Only when individuals in every community truly shift their mindsets, persistently fight prejudice, and educate the next generation can we hope for a world free of barriers.